Get off this property before I call the cops. You don't live here anymore. You never really belonged here. I was standing on the porch of the only home I'd ever known, my keys still in my hand, 2 bags sitting at my feet. And when the officer stepped out of that car and looked at me, really looked, everything was about to change. My name is Bridget Callahan. I'm 31 years old. I work as a licensed paralegal at a small firm. It's not glamorous work, there's no corner office, no big salary, but it made me careful. It made me detail-oriented in a way that most people never noticed, and a few people would come to regret. I grew up in that house, the one I was just told to leave. My mother, Margaret, bought it before she ever met Dale. I still have a memory of sitting at the kitchen table as a little girl, watching her sign the mortgage paperwork. She used her good pen, the one she saved for important things. She passed 2 years ago after a long illness. I was her primary caregiver for most of that time. I stayed close, skipped promotions, rearranged my whole life, quietly, without asking for credit. That's just who I was. Dale came into the picture when I was 14. Charming at church, cold at home. He had a son, Connor, from a previous relationship. And from the day Dale moved in, Connor was the one who got the praise, the patience, the benefit of every doubt, the prized child, the one who could do no wrong. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't loud. But I had spent 2 years reading every document in that house. And I knew something Dale had completely forgotten. If you've ever been the one who sacrificed the most and somehow ended up treated like the least, you're going to want to stay for every second of this story. Bridget's situation might feel familiar to you in ways that are uncomfortable and real. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this. And I have to ask, have you ever felt like an outsider in your own home? Drop that in the comments. And if this is already hitting close, go ahead and tap like. It helps more than you know. 3 months after my mother's funeral, Dale called a family meeting. He used that phrase like it meant something. I drove to the house expecting a conversation about estate logistics, timelines, belongings, maybe some paperwork to sort through together. What I found instead was a setup. Dale and Connor were already seated when I arrived. That part I expected. What I did not expect was the woman at the head of the table. Renee. Dale's new girlfriend. I had heard the name exactly once. She sat like she owned the room, one hand resting on the table, examining her nails while I was still taking off my coat. Dale slid a single piece of paper across the table toward me without looking up. A quitclaim deed. He wanted me to sign over any interest I had in the house. His voice was almost bored when he said it. Your mother wanted this handled quietly. You were always temporary here, Bridget. You know that. Connor didn't look up from his phone. I asked to see the will. Dale waved his hand. The will is being handled by my attorney. You'll get what you're owed. But this house? This was never yours. I didn't sign. I said I needed time to review the document, a completely reasonable request. Any reasonable person would agree with that. Dale, however, was not interested in being reasonable. His whole energy shifted in seconds. The board dismissal was gone. Something colder replaced it. He told me I had until the end of the week to clear my personal belongings out of my childhood bedroom, the room I had been staying in while I nursed my mother through the final year of her life. He said Renee would be redecorating. He said it like it was already done, like I had already lost. I walked out without another word. On the way to my car, I called the senior attorney at my firm. My hands were steady. My voice was steady. And then he said something that stopped me completely. Bridget, did your mother ever add you to the deed? Because I think she did. I stood in that driveway for a long moment. The air smelled like cut grass and something burning faintly from a neighbor's yard. I didn't say anything. I just stood there and let those words land. Then I got in the car and started paying attention. The next week, I began pulling county property records from my office computer. Quiet work, the kind I was trained for. But Dale was somehow tipped off, and his response was not to call me. His response was to call my employer. He told them I had been emotionally unstable since my mother's death. Not aggressive, not accusatory, just enough to plant doubt, just enough to make my boss look at me sideways. My boss pulled me aside that afternoon with a careful, uncomfortable expression. I felt my face go warm. I kept my voice even. I thanked him for telling me and walked back to my desk. I did not cry. I opened the next document on my screen. 2 weeks later, my mother's church held a small memorial gathering, the kind of low-key potluck remembrance that Margaret would have loved. I went because she would have wanted me there. Dale brought Renee. He stood at the front of the room and introduced her to the congregation as the woman who will be taking care of the family home going forward. No mention of me, not a glance in my direction. When a woman named Gloria, a friend of my mother's for 20 years, asked quietly where I fit into everything, Dale said it loud enough for half the room to hear. Bridget was Margaret's daughter from before. She's been struggling with the transition. Every head turned. I felt it like a hand pressing on my chest. I smiled. I excused myself. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes, let myself feel it, all of it. Then I smoothed my skirt, walked back inside, and finished my plate of food. The third move was Connor. He texted me a few days later, and for one weak moment I let myself hope it was genuine. "Hey," he wrote. "Maybe just sign the paper. Dale's not going to stop." And honestly, Mom would have wanted peace. I read it twice. I set my phone down. He wasn't reaching out as a brother, he was a messenger. And the message was pressure dressed up as concern. When I didn't respond, Dale escalated. He changed the locks on the house while a box of my mother's personal documents and photographs was still inside. I drove over. He met me on the porch, arms crossed, expression flat. "You're trespassing," he said. "Then, leave before I make this ugly." That was the day I stopped grieving and started paying attention, completely, fully, without sentiment. What they didn't know was that I had spent 18 months inside that house, and caregivers notice things. They notice everything because being a caregiver means paying close attention to details that other people are too comfortable to see. While managing my mother's affairs during those final months, I had made copies of key documents, not out of suspicion, out of habit. The original deed, my mother's handwritten notes on her estate, and one document that had stayed in the back of a folder in my work bag for over a year, a signed and notarized co-ownership addendum. My mother had quietly filed it with the county recorder's office 14 months before she died. She had added me as a joint owner with right of survivorship. She never told Dale. She told me once, late on a night when the house was quiet and she was tired but alert. She held my hand and said, "This house was mine before him. It'll be yours after me." I had held on to those words the way you hold on to something fragile. And I had kept the paperwork. There was something else, too. Out of pure paralegal habit, I had photographed and cataloged nearly every document I handled during the caregiving period, including a bank form. A joint account amendment Dale had submitted weeks after my mother's death, with her signature on it, dated 11 days after she passed. Dale had built his whole plan on the assumption that I was just a grieving daughter who didn't know how paperwork worked. He forgot what I did for a living. I hadn't said a word yet. I was waiting for the right moment, and the right witness. Mr. Okafor had drawn up my mother's original will years ago, before Dale decided to bring in his own guy. He was semi-retired now, working limited cases out of a small office that smelled faintly of old paper and leather. I called him on a Tuesday morning. He remembered my mother immediately, warmly, the way people remember someone genuinely good. When I brought him the co-ownership addendum and laid it on his desk, he went quiet. He read it carefully. Once, then again. Then he said, "Your stepfather's attorney either doesn't know this exists, or he's hoping you don't." He agreed to represent me at a significantly reduced rate. Out of respect for Margaret, he said simply, "We filed a lis pendens with the county, a formal legal notice of the property dispute. The moment it was filed, Dale could not sell, transfer, or refinance that house while the claim was pending." Dale received the notice and called me screaming. I let him finish. "You want to play lawyer games? I'll have you removed. That house is mine, and you are nothing." Connor posted something vague on social media about vultures who show up after someone dies. He didn't use my name. He didn't need to. Family friends began choosing sides, quietly, the way people do when they sense a storm coming. Renee began posting home renovation content from inside the house, tagging the address, showing paint swatches, acting as though the outcome was already written, as though I had simply failed to show up for my own life. Then Dale did something that surprised even me. He scheduled a formal property transfer signing at a title company and sent me a legal notice to appear. His logic, I think, was that I would either fold under the formality of it, or simply not come. He believed that a paralegal without a law degree would wilt in a room full of suits. He sent me an invitation to my own ambush, so I made sure to bring everything. I arrived at the title company with Mr. Okafor beside me. Dale was already seated. The moment he saw Mr. Okafor, something shifted in his expression, quickly covered, but I caught it. Dale's attorney, a polished man named Greer, opened with a practiced calm. "Ms. Callahan, we appreciate you coming. We'd like to resolve this amicably. If you'll simply acknowledge that the quitclaim represents your mother's wishes." I opened my folder. I slid the notarized co-ownership addendum across the table. The room went silent. Greer picked it up. "Read it once. Read it again." His face stayed composed, but his jaw tightened. A small tell, the kind you only catch if you're watching closely. Dale leaned over to read it. Then he looked up at me. "That's a fake," she would have told me. Mr. O'Colfer's voice was calm and even. "It's filed with the county recorder's office. Filed 14 months ago. You can verify the document number right now if you'd like." Dale's voice rose. "She was sick. She didn't know what she was signing." "I'll contest it." "You can try," I said. I kept my voice steady and direct. "But while you're deciding, you should know I also have a copy of the signature on the joint account amendment you filed in October, the one with my mother's name on it, dated 11 days after she passed." The room went very still. The hum of the building's air system was suddenly the loudest thing in it. Greer quietly set down his pen. Dale's face moved through anger, then calculation, then something I had never seen from him before. Something that looked almost like fear. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said. "I'm a paralegal, Dale. I'd been reading documents like that for 8 years. I know exactly what I'm talking about." Mr. Okafor formally notified Greer that the forged signature documentation had already been submitted to the county DA's office for review. The signing did not happen. Greer asked for a recess. Dale stood up so fast his chair scraped back against the floor. He walked out into the hallway without looking at anyone. Connor had come to watch his father win. He was standing near the door when I walked out. He looked at me and opened his mouth slightly, then said nothing. I walked past him without slowing down. That evening I drove to the house. My house. I called a locksmith. When Dale pulled into the driveway and saw what was happening, he called the police. The officers arrived. One of them stepped out, looked at the situation, and walked toward me. He asked for my name and proof of ownership. I handed him the filed deed. He read it. Looked at Dale. Looked back at the document. "Sir," he said, "you need to step aside." The forgery investigation moved quickly once it was in the hands of the DA's office. Dale's attorney, Greer, withdrew from the case within 2 weeks, a move that said everything without saying anything. Dale faced potential fraud charges tied to the post-death account filing, the kind of charges that follow a person. As the sole surviving co-owner with right of survivorship, I was confirmed as the legal owner of the house. Dale moved out within 30 days by court agreement. Renee's renovation post disappeared from social media without explanation. The paint swatches and tagged address, gone. Connor reached out one more time, about a month later. No performance this time, no script. He just said, "I didn't know he was doing all of that." I listened. I said okay. I didn't forgive him right away. I'm not sure I fully have. But I left the door open, barely. Just a crack, because my mother would have wanted that much. I moved back in. I kept one room exactly as she had left it. Her reading chair still faces the window. I don't move it. I'm not loud about what happened. I didn't post about it. I didn't need anyone to clap. I changed the locks myself this time. My mother didn't leave me money or status. She left me a document, a deed, and the quiet belief that I was worth protecting. Turns out she was right. If you've ever been pushed out by someone who assumed you were too tired or too soft to fight back, this one was for you. The people who underestimate the quiet ones always forget one thing. The quiet ones are usually the ones who've been paying attention. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had to fight for something that was already yours? I want to read every single one. And if this story moved you, click like. It helps this reach someone else who might need to hear it today. Bridget didn't just get her house back, she got her footing back. And sometimes that's what a fight is really about. Not the property, not the paperwork, but the moment you stop letting someone else define what you're worth. Next, we have a story about a woman who was written out of a family business until an old email changed everything. Subscribe and hit the bell so you're there when it drops.